It's the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. And, just about a year down the road from the Supreme Court taking a big bite out of it, Angelia Wade Stubbs, the Associate General Counsel with the AFL-CIO, AFL-CIO.org, of course, the website, is on the line with us. Angelia, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Your thoughts and the AFL-CIO's thoughts on the Voting Rights Act and the current state of affairs?
Well, the AFL-CIO greatly supports voting rights, and the Voting Rights Act, of course, is central to ensuring that every eligible person has the right to vote. We are, like others, dismayed that we are having this conversation 50 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, and seeing that significant parts of the act have been struck down by the courts, and having to revisit a conversation about how we protect the rights of American citizens to vote.
Yeah. There is no affirmative right to vote in the Constitution outside of the 13th Amendment, which is exclusively for African-American men or former slaves, I guess, or whatever the language of the 13th Amendment is. And of course, this is because when the founders put together the Constitution, women did not have the right to vote, and people of color men of color did not have the right to vote. Is it time for, Martin O'Malley's calling for a constitutional amendment protecting the right to vote. Bernie Sanders has talked about it in the past. I'm sure others have. Is it time for us to seriously think about, amending the Constitution and saying that this is an affirmative right to vote, and maybe following in the footsteps of what Oregon did this week, and say basically, as soon as you turn 18 or as soon as you apply for anything that establishes your citizenship, driver's license or whatever, you're automatically registered to vote, and in fact, you have to opt out if you don't want to be. What do you think?
We think that voting is the cornerstone of democracy, and anything that encourages people to vote and makes it easier for people to vote, we do support. Indeed, there is no constitutional right to vote per se, but the fact that we say that generally in civil rights circles lets us know how important it is to be able to exercise your right to vote, so to speak, if you meet the requirements to vote. And I think it is about time that we move to a place where people can opt out of voting, and when they have some type of contact with a state government or an agency, that they are moved into the process of registering to vote, and that we make it easier for their registrations to follow them when they move. I don't think that that as a country we should be erecting barriers for people who are trying to vote.
Yeah, I remember when I was much younger, living in Michigan. I think this was maybe back in the 70s or 80s. The Motor Voter Act was all the rage. I'm pretty sure it passed in Michigan, where when you get your driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote. Instead, over the last couple of decades, with these ALEC-sponsored laws, the American Legislative Exchange Council, the Koch brothers' little bill mill, it's not so little, actually, promoting the suppression of voting all across the United States. That's sort of the bad news. On the other hand, yesterday, the day before, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down Texas's voter suppression law as being unconstitutional. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think the Texas case proves just how important it is for us to have a restored Voting Rights Act that has some teeth in it, that allows us to avoid such costly litigation and laws like that really look, that really have a discriminatory impact, which is what the Court of Appeals found in the Texas case, that their voter ID law would have a discriminatory impact in violation of the Voting Rights Act. And so I think that we need to focus on how many people in the meantime were discriminated against, were denied the opportunity to vote because you had this type of law in place through an election.
Right.
And with the Voting Rights Act, conceivably, this type of legislation would have been stopped, and those many persons would not have been denied the opportunity to vote.
But then we still have the problem of what happened, for example, in Florida in 2000, just a month before the election. Jeb Bush ordered Catherine Harris to purge the number is still in debate, 60 to 80,000 people off the voting polls in that state, and it looks like between 40 and 70% of those people were African Americans. It probably flipped the election, or got it close enough for George W. Bush to take it to the Supreme Court and get himself appointed. How do we do that? Would a constitutional affirmative right to vote prevent that kind of thing?
Well, there are so many pieces that go into a particular issue like that. I mean, from the people who are elected to run the elections, you have to have people with integrity who are going to follow the rules. You can have, that right to vote, and there can be someone who's unscrupulous who's looking for the opportunity to deny that right. So there are going to have to be several different pieces, several, different safeguards put in place so that something like that doesn't happen again. Once you get the right, there are, steps, of course, to make sure that that right is recognized, that right is honored. As we saw, African American men had the right to vote back in the 1860s. We had the right to be free, but a lot of those rights were not recognized or respected for years later. So once you get that right, there are additional steps that have to be taken to protect it.
Right. Senator Sanders formally introduced two pieces of legislation yesterday. One would automatically register all eligible individuals to vote when they turn 18. The other would declare Election Day as a national holiday. He's also going to be introducing legislation this fall calling for public funding of elections. Is the AFL-CIO, we're talking with Angelia Wade Stubbs, the Associate General Counsel at the AFL-CIO. Is the AFL-CIO taking any position on any kind of specific legislative remedies right now?
So that comes out of our legislative department and our state government affairs as to which legislation we are going to be supporting. I will say, though, that we are definitely supporting a universal voter registration. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like just an entirely reasonable first step, and it's mind-boggling to me that the Republican strategy, as first laid out by Paul Weyrich back in 1980. When he was running the Reagan campaign, was we don't want everybody to vote.
Right, and I've seen that video. Yeah, it's very disturbing.
Yeah, and it's still their mantra. I mean, it's just absolutely still their mantra. And they're in the last election, best estimate, I guess, is over 2 million people got knocked off voting rolls in various states. Chris Kobach leading that charge, the Secretary of State in Kansas, who's got this 30-some-odd state list. Anyway, great talking with you. Angelia Wade Stubbs, the Associate General Counsel with the AFL-CIO, on this 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. AFLCIO.org, the website. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks.
Good talking with you.